Okay, today we're going to talk about aggregate supply. And as you can see on the screen, that aggregate supply by definition is the measure of the total amount being supplied in an economy. And so we're just measuring how much stuff is actually being produced. And that really is what makes up our aggregate supply. And we're going to learn over the next couple of days that aggregate supply is split into two different categories. We categorize aggregate supply as short-run aggregate supply and long-run aggregate supply. And today we're going to specifically focus on just the short-run aggregate supply. So if we start with graphing aggregate supply, I am going to set up our aggregate supply graph, and I am showing the relationship between price level on our vertical axis and real GDP on our horizontal axis. And it's important for us to know that the short-run aggregate supply curve is always an upward sloping curve, and we label that SRAS for short-run aggregate supply, also abbreviated as the SRAS. And so what this graph shows us then is that as price level increases or decreases, the amount that businesses are going to want to produce in the economy is also going to change. Then that's going to influence the GDP in our economy. And so we can pick any price level that we want, and at that specific price level, that allows us to determine the output for our economy at that price level. Now also remember that when we're graphing, an increase is always going to be a shift to the right, and a decrease is always going to be a shift to the left. And if we can remember left is always less, that will help us keep that change straight. So next we move to our short-run aggregate supply determinants. And determinants, again, are just factors that cause or are going to cause the short-run aggregate supply curve to shift, either increase or decrease. So our first factor is going to be resource prices. And really resource prices are just the cost or the price that we have to pay for land, labor, or capital. So I think a good example would be wages. Anytime we have a change in wages, what we're going to find is that is going to change the resource prices, the cost of production, which then is going to influence how much that we can produce. For our example, let's say we have an increase in wages, and that just means that we need to pay our workers more money. And so that increase in wages means that we're paying our workers more money, so we have less money, or businesses have less money available, and so that's going to decrease our production or our short-run aggregate supply curve. All right, moving on. Determinant number 2 is going to be any change in labor productivity. So we're going to put labor productivity. And really labor productivity is just what our workers can produce or what they're capable of. And so things that can change that labor productivity, typically we'll put here, for example, would be technology or human capital. And remember, human capital really is just a fancy term that represents our experiences, our education, and our knowledge that we have. And so if any of those things increase, let's say, technology or human capital, then that would translate into an increase in our short-run aggregate supply curve, indicating that better technology or better human capital leads to an increase in production in the economy. Moving on to determinant number 3. Determinant number 3 is going to be business taxes. And this is just the government's way of taking money away from businesses or giving businesses more money. And so when there's a change in business taxes, that is going to impact businesses' ability to produce. So let's say in our example, we lower business taxes. That means that our businesses have more money available because they're paying less to the government. Therefore, those businesses are going to be able to increase their production, shifting the SRAS to the right. And our last determinant is going to be any natural disaster.